Hi, welcome back to my kitchen. The next page in our taco manual takes us to Tzik. Tacos of Tzik. Now, you may never have heard of tacos of Tzik, but when you go to the Yucatan, they are so worth seeking out. Now, it's a beef taco, but it's not a beef taco that's served warm. Like a lot of things in the Yucatan Peninsula, it's served like at room temperature because it's really hot out in the Yucatan. And it's shot through with those Yucatecan flavors like habanero chili and the sour orange juice or lime juice. Let me just take you through how to make it because I think this is going to be something you're going to turn to during the warm weather months. Okay, so I've got some flank steak here. And I'm going to cut it into basically 2-inch squares. So you don't have to be too exact, but you want bigger squares for this because we are going to simmer this until it's tender, and then we're going to shred it. And that's going to be the base of our dzik tacos. Okay, so we've got those there. I've got some water on simmering here, and I'm going to put all of this is about a pound of meat here into that, and then I'm going to add some salt to it. When you're salting the water for cooking any kind of meat or poultry, or even fish, if you're poaching fish, it takes a lot more salt than you think because you're actually salting the water that it's cooking in. You're not salting the meat itself. Now, as this comes back to a simmer here, I'm going to turn the temperature up just a little bit. I'm going to start skimming it of any grayish foam that comes to the top. If you're going to make this delicious broth, I think you should take care of it and actually produce a really beautiful broth from it, which means sort of skimming it during the first part of its cooking. I'll show you when we get some of that grayish foam on the top, I will show you what that looks like. Come over here and take a look at this. You can see all of that sort of grayish foam that has risen to the top. I'm using a skimmer here to get it off. And it's very easy to get off. Nothing tricky there at all. I'm going to add flavorings to this. I've got some bay leaves that are going to go in there. I've got some garlic cloves that I have peeled already and cut in half. If you cut them in half, they will give more flavor to the broth. So those will go in there. And then I've chopped up a red onion, very classic in the Yucatan to use red onions. And half of it's going to go in the finished dish. Half of it is just going to go right into this pot to add more flavor. Now I'm going to put the top on and we'll let that simmer for its hour or so. You just want to make sure that it's completely tender. Now, after it is tender, I'm going to let it cool off in the broth. This isn't something you absolutely have to do, but I will tell you it will make the meat juicier if you let it cool off in the broth, so I highly recommend it. I'll meet you back here once it's cooled off in the broth, and I'll show you about shredding. Okay, this meat cooled off in the broth, and then I have been shredding on it. Because there are grains that are very defined in flank steak, it's really easy to shred it, and they hold together, the pieces hold together really well. I usually just use my thumb and kind of go across the top of it, and I can pull it into these nice strands like this. And then when you get down to the bottom, you'll be sort of pulling them apart one at a time, sort of like that. But you want to do this until you get the meat very thinly, in very thin pieces, I should say, very thin strands here. Okay, we've got that. I've got only one more piece, and then we're ready to go on to the next stage, which will be preparing the vegetables for this. Okay, I've gotten all of that meat shredded there. And now it's time to chop up all the vegetables that go in here. Classic for the Yucatan is to have a lot of brightness, spiciness, and crunch. So for crunch, we're going to have the red onion that I showed you already. We have some radishes here, which I'm going to slice into little matchsticks. For herbiness, of course, cilantro. Habanero is going to give us the heat there, and I'm going to squeeze some lime that's going to make this whole thing come alive. I'll meet you back when I've gotten all these ready. Okay, first let's talk about the lime juice, the fresh squeezed lime juice that I use. If you were making this in the Yucatan or eating it in the Yucatan, it would always be sour orange juice. Now that doesn't mean regular orange juice that happens to taste a little sour. It's a different variety of orange that is as sour as a lime, and they grow so much of it in the Yucatan that they use it in everything. We can't get that easily. Yeah, we could come up with something that's like a mixture of lime and orange juice, a little bit of orange juice, but I don't find it useful to go to those extremes. So I always say, and people in the Yucatan would say, if you don't have sour orange, just use lime. So that's why I'm using lime. Now I'm making this with flank steak, which is kind of my #1 choice, but you might want to make it with skirt steak, which works really very similarly because it has the grains that go through it that are very visible and makes it way easier for shredding. So choose whether you want to have flank steak or skirt steak. Now back to the recipe. Now I'm rinsing off this red onion that I cut earlier. It's always a good idea if you're going to use raw onion in anything to rinse it off so that it has that bright, fresh flavor, not that sort of stale, that flavor that a lot of people don't like in raw onions. Okay, so now we're going to put all of this stuff together. I shook off the excess water there. So red onions going into the shredded meat there. I've got I did little matchsticks. You could just chop them into little pieces if you want. The radishes and then the cilantro, everything is right here. That habanero chili. Put as much or as little of that habanero chili as you like. In the recipe, I wrote 1 to 2. For habaneros, honestly, I'm a kind of one guy for this because they have this great flavor, but they also have a lot of heat. Now, I'm going to put in about 1/3 of a cup here of this lime juice. I'm going to start with a sprinkling of salt over all of this. And then the best way to get this all combined would be to use your fingers to work all of the vegetables into the meat. You can do it with a spoon, but it'll take you 3 times as long. So I'm mixing those guys in there. And then I'm going to rinse my hands off and come back and make tacos for you. All right, time to make tacos here. I've got some hot tortillas. Today they're blue corn tortillas because those are what we're making at our restaurant right now. So we'll put that, it's an heirloom type of blue corn that we use for that. A really distinct flavor, I think, if you haven't had that before. And I'm going to use some tongs here to make little mounds of the beef on top of that, and that's really what they're all about. If you wanted to kind of decorate them up a little bit, nobody would ever complain about, well, at least not the people I know, would complain about more cilantro leaves on the top to finish it. I'm going to take a taste of it because, man, my mouth is watering. These bold, bright flavors of the Yucatan are so delicious.